Isaiah said, "The Lord will go forth like a warrior. He will arouse his zeal like a man of war. He will utter a shout. Yes, he will raise a war cry. He will prevail against his enemies." The air was thick in Israel with the anticipation of the long-awaited Messiah to deliver our people. It was so thick you could almost cut it with one of the swords we had sharpened and ready at our sides to battle the evil oppressors. Surely the divine arithmetic of Daniel's 70 weeks was about to be fulfilled at any moment. Our hearts were sick with hundreds of years of hope yet unfulfilled. Hopes were always highest during the festivals, which brought our people together from far and near. The Feast of Dedication in particular now seemed more hollow than hopeful after the fall of the Hasmonean dynasty. We didn't care that they weren't from the house of David and the rightful heirs to the throne. At least for 100 years, we had been ruled again by our own people instead of uncircumcised evil pagans like that son of Esau, Herod. When that monster was finally dead, several revolts sprang up. 2,000 retired soldiers fought for the crown and were defeated. Simon of Perea took Herod's crown and declared himself king before being beheaded. Judas, the son of Hezekiah, led a band of robbers to loot the palace and intimidate the people through terror, but ultimately was not victorious. Athronges, a shepherd, proclaimed himself to be the Messiah and committed guerrilla warfare against the Romans. But his movement ended when his 4 brothers were captured. Judas the Galilean, who inspired the Zealots, was angry at the heavy burden of Roman taxes and led a revolt before being slain with the sword. After so many failed uprisings, it was finally time for a win. That's when Jesus of Nazareth stepped on the scene. He was introduced by the fiery John the Baptist, who broke the sacred silence in the desert that had lasted for over 400 years. This was the dawn of a new era. Jesus was baptized by John in the Jordan before he chose 12 disciples that would make up this new Israel. At last, our dreams were finally beginning to materialize in this Son of David, the true King of Israel and the rightful heir to the throne. I was the youngest of the 12 and obviously the best looking. It's easy to see why I was the rabbi's favorite disciple. At that point, we weren't exactly sure how Jesus was going to overthrow the Romans. We just knew that he was what we had been waiting for, and we couldn't possibly lose. He started out by turning water into wine at a wedding, a jubilee of jubilees. The next thing we know, he was flipping tables over in the temple during Passover, letting the animals out of their cages and throwing out the corrupt money changers. God was in charge now, and he was cleaning house. The Jewish authorities were unimpressed with our ragtag group of unorthodox and mostly uneducated men. This was a massive grassroots movement like they had never seen before, and the political establishment of our own people, who had made their bed with Rome, were shaking in their sandals. You do have to admit we were quite a mix. No one but Jesus could have put us all together with our various backgrounds and ideas about the kingdom. We still tried never to leave Simon the Zealot alone with Matthew the tax collector, just in case Simon got a little overzealous. Though we were constantly in awe of Jesus, sometimes we were left scratching our heads. My brother James and I wanted to do the honorable thing and call down fire from heaven on those ungrateful half-breed Samaritans. They wouldn't let us stay in their town just because we were on our way to Jerusalem. But Jesus rebuked us. How could we win if we don't kill the bad guys? I guess he really was serious when he was telling us to love our enemies and be good to them. This was truly radical. We had so many prostitutes following us that we were starting to get a shady reputation. Tax collectors, or as we preferred to call them, corrupt Roman sympathizing traitors and thieves, loved him. When he healed the son of the Roman centurion, a commander in the enemy army, it almost made us question his Jewish loyalty. Nevertheless, his popularity continued among the masses. All of Israel had heard of his healing lepers, giving sight to the blind, as his authority over demon spirits, and raising the dead. When he fed the 5,000 with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, many were convinced that he was the Messiah. Everyone thought that this would have been the perfect time for him to ascend the throne. Why would he wait any longer? But he just slipped away. The crowds chased him down the next day, but he told them that they were just looking for a handout because of the loaves and fish. Many people quit following him after he gave that strange discourse about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. Those strange images became all too real much later at the last Passover we had together. As we slowly chewed the bread he had referred to as his broken body, and sipped from the cup of wine he had referred to as his blood. As the youngest, I sat next to Jesus and asked the traditional questions that a son usually asks a father. Why is this night different from all others? This was truly a Passover like no other. Not only did it look back to the time when we were redeemed from slavery in Egypt, it looked forward to the bizarre manner in which Christ would redeem us from the slavery of sin. Over and over again throughout the time we had spent with him, he had mentioned things about suffering and death and rising from the dead, but it was beyond our comprehension. Surely this must be a symbolic death and suffering that he spoke about. When Peter and some of the rest of us told Jesus that we would die with him, we thought we might face death gallantly, marching on Jerusalem and fighting in battle against the Romans. We never dreamed of just lying down and taking it. When they arrested Jesus, of course we were all scared. We had seen these things happen before, and we knew as his closest followers, we would probably all be next. How could this happen? A crucified Messiah was a failed Messiah. How could we have been so wrong? As I stood there by his mother Mary beneath the cross, I looked up at the 2 thieves which were being crucified on either side of him. It made me remember how embarrassed James and I were and how jealous the other 10 were when our mother dragged us to Jesus to demand of him that we be on his right and on his left when he came into his glory. We had no idea at that time what we were asking, nor what was in the cup that we assured him we were able to drink. Throughout the Passover meal, as we drank from the different cups, rich with meaning for us, he did not drink himself from the cup that symbolized God's protection before passing it to the rest of us. He said he couldn't drink that one now. And in the garden, as he prayed before being arrested, he kept asking the Father if it be his will to let this cup pass from him. Rabbis had argued for centuries over another cup of Passover that no one had ever drank from, the mysterious cup of Elijah, or cup of God's wrath. It was a puzzle that they just could not solve. Now I was watching in horror beneath the cross as his blood dripped upon me as he drank that cup to the dregs. Our eyes had been too clouded with our own nationalistic hopes to see the bigger picture. But after the Lord had risen from the dead, we began to see. He allowed all of the powers of evil to be concentrated upon himself to extinguish them there. He conquered death by surrendering to it. He won by losing. His shameful death on the cross was the means by which he was lifted up in regal glory. You may ask, if Christ is king and has overthrown the powers of darkness, why then do they still seem to prevail? Rest assured that the ultimate victory has been won, even though Satan still kicks and screams in defeat. As Christ taught us in many parables, his kingdom did not come as a sudden universal utopia as we had hoped. Instead, it came as a planted seed, growing gradually until he comes again. Until then, suffering and celebration are constant companions. Jesus inaugurated the kingdom with his words and deeds, but it now requires the actions of his followers with the help of the Holy Spirit to further advance the kingdom until its consummation. We had hoped to have a perfect government that would propel into action the good deeds that Jesus began. But alas, Caesar still sits on the throne. This is not cause for despair. This work will be accomplished instead through individuals who follow Jesus. Even one can make a difference, but joined hand in hand, we are stronger together. Would you also like to follow Jesus and help advance his kingdom here on earth? Love your enemies and seek opportunities to bless them and do good to them. Forgive freely those who have sinned against you, whether small or great, just as God has freely forgiven us through Christ. Visit those in prison and those who are sick, that you might bring the light of hope into the darkness and help bind the brokenhearted. Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, look after the widow and the orphan. Speak for those who have no voice. Spread this good news to all the world. God did not just send the Messiah to save Israel, but to save all of creation through Israel, including Gentiles. Everyone is invited to join. No one is excluded. This is a kingdom that trumps all others. We will overcome the world not with the love of power, but with the power of love.